The lights are turned on inside Madison Square Garden and a massive collection of eggs is revealed, each of them larger than a human being. The whole team is in shock, not one of them had expected such a massive find. O'Neill is quick with informing Hicks about the find, while Sarasawa just wanders around in awe. Newton heads over to Nick and confronts him with the thoughts of what might happen if all of these eggs were to hatch. Neither one of them wants to imagine that. Ford and his men scan the whole area as they make a count of all the eggs. It's then that he hears some noises coming out from behind the door. Ford's men are quick to aim their weapons as they fear the worst. Is it possible that some of the eggs have already hatched? Ford gives an order and soon they barge in the door where the sound was coming from the other side. Only to stumble across an entirely different team, led by Special Agent Philippe Rocher. The weapons are dropped, but both groups did get startled there for a second. Ford demands Philippe to explain their presence, after which he mentions they are also here in search of a possible kaiju nest. It appears the Americans beat them to it. O'Neill chuckles, claiming the French have no idea what they're in for. Outside in the city, the trucks are still being chased by the massive kaiju. The chase is very hectic as the monster is right on their heels. The soldiers inside the trucks even yell loudly as they fear for their lives. But it's then that a group of fighter jets pass overhead and lose several missiles, directly hitting the kaiju and several buildings as well. It takes the monster by surprise as it gets engulfed by fire, dust, and collapsing debris. A loud roar is heard, and soldiers inside the trucks cheer loudly as they believe they've made it out. The pilots also announce a direct hit, which both Hicks and Stans back at the military base confirm. In Madison Square Garden, both groups join each other. It's made clear how the French have brought a ton of explosives, claiming their intention was to destroy the whole nest before it would hatch. Newton then states their intention was to collect samples and possibly a whole egg. But since the eggs are far too big, they will have to collect what they can. Philippe makes it very clear that his team is not leaving this place before making sure none of these eggs are left intact. They must be destroyed. After some arguing, the Americans are forced to agree. The scientists are all given 15 minutes to gather what they can, and then they will blow up this whole place. Outside, the dust and smoke from the missile attack clear. The fighter jets pass overhead again but are shocked as they can't see a body or anything. The kaiju has simply disappeared. Shocked, they immediately warn the commanders, who then warn the trucks who are still en route to the Brooklyn Bridge. The soldiers in the trucks immediately stop cheering when they hear this announcement, only to then experience the fright of their lives when the kaiju bursts out of the ground in front of them, having crawled its way underneath the city, but are too late as one of the two trucks crashes directly into the kaiju's open mouth. The men inside scream for their lives but are killed instantly when the monster bites down hard. The other truck manages to evade and sends an emergency signal to the fighter jets overhead by firing a flare gun. The jets see it and head into position as quickly as possible, but are too late as a second truck gets caught up by the kaiju as well and crushed by one of its feet. Hicks and Stans have lost contact with the soldiers on the ground, knowing they have all been killed. That's when Hicks, enraged, sends out all of his air troops, and we get a massive shot of dozens of fighter helicopters and extra jets taking off in the air, heading towards the kaiju that is now in lower Manhattan near Broadway. The monster sees the incoming attack and it roars with all its might, ready to defend its nest. At the nest itself, Newton, Nick, Sarasawa, Vivienne and all the other scientists are busy gathering all the samples that they can. They really wanted to take at least one egg, but due to their size, this is impossible. Newton does stare at one of them for a while, wondering what would be inside of them. Baby kaijus. O'Neill has a talk with Philippe while Ford oversees the situation. O'Neill finds it strange why on earth the French are here. He doesn't fully buy the explanation they got earlier. Philippe eventually sighs and reveals how it was the idea of the French government back in the day to use the nuclear weapons against the kaijus. They actively promoted it to all the global superpowers when it first deemed effective. But this was only at first. Yet now, they've all been witness to the enemy's evolution, and their greatest hope of victory, along with the Jaegers that is, has now become the reason they're losing. Philippe believes it's their fault, and now he wants to correct that mistake in the name of his country. O'Neill respects that. Soon the scientists have gathered what they can: slime, some scales, plenty of tissue. It will have to do. When they all want to pack their things, Newton finds it a shame that they couldn't get a whole egg. He even has a short chat with Vivienne as they talk about maybe drilling inside of the eggs and get some DNA there. But as they're talking about this, they hear something. Something growling faintly from inside the massive egg in front of them. They can't believe it. Newton gets closer and starts to listen. There's something moving on the inside. Some of Philippe's men come to him and mention they don't have enough explosions to blow up the whole garden. They severely underestimated this scenario. Frustrated, Philippe tells O'Neill and Ford that they need to think smart and bomb this building from a distance. Outside, the kaiju battles with the jets and helicopters. They open fire at him from all sides, but it hardly shows any effect. The monster is either too fast or it simply won't take any damage. The kaiju manages to slam one helicopter against the building with its tail, while grabbing another one with its claws, and proceeds to eat the whole thing with the people still inside. Hicks and Stentz keep on ordering their men to not retreat. Hicks himself soon contacts O'Neill, urging them to hurry up. They can't keep the monster occupied for much longer. O'Neill receives this and gives a final order to place every explosive they have. They will then bomb this building from afar. Everyone complies. Serizawa passes by Newton, who is still listening to the egg. He also notices something happening, as does Vivienne. As they stare, they are a witness to a baby kaiju very slowly bursting and crawling through the eggshell. They are simply in awe. But that awe slowly fades as suddenly every single egg in the whole garden starts to shiver and hatch. Newton and Serizawa look around. They are in trouble. Nick also notices and gasps. He yells at the soldiers, "They're hatching!" Ford, O'Neill, Philippe and all the other soldiers look around and are also shocked to see it happening. All the hundreds of eggs. Serizawa claims Newton has gotten more than he bargained for. O'Neill yells at everyone to gather up, they're leaving this place, now! But most people are too far apart from each other as the little kaijus come out of their eggs and start looking around, smelling, baring their teeth. Newton and Serizawa stay close together as they can see the little monsters looking at them with hunger in their eyes. And very slowly, the two men back away, trying to remain calm. The soldiers of Ford are shaking as they see the hundreds of silhouettes crawling around them. Ford urges them to remain calm. If they can exit this hall, then they can get out without any more trouble. It's a very tense moment. Until suddenly, one of Ford's soldiers gets touched by a kaiju's tail. This completely spooks the man and causes him to fire his gun, hurting the little monster. A horrifying moment follows as the sound echoes through the hall and every single little monster stares at them with anger and hunger in their eyes. It's O'Neill who yells out the final order. Get out! Every single person in the massive hall runs for the nearest exit as suddenly every baby kaiju comes chasing after them. The entire team has split up. Newton and Serizawa are together with some others. Nick finds Vivienne and the rest, while Ford, O'Neill and Philippe are also together. They all open fire with their rifles, but the bullets hardly have any effect since the kaiju's skin is already far too strong. They all run as fast as they can through one of the many doors and try to get out of the building. Hicks is still losing helicopter after helicopter out there. One of the fighter jets even gets smacked out of the air during a strafing run. They're losing too many. Hicks yells at O'Neill through their earpiece, which is when he hears the horrifying news that every egg is hatching. They're trying to escape the garden as fast as they can. In some of the hallways of the garden, we see several soldiers, American and French alike, shooting at every monster that comes at them, but they all get overpowered and killed. We get a whole scene of people running for their lives, but each of them getting picked off one by one. It's an absolute massacre. Stans also hears this through the earpiece and suggests sending a rescue team, which Hicks approves. They will send an evacuation helicopter to the garden ASAP. O'Neill, however, urges them to blow the whole building up. If even one of these babies reaches the outside, who knows where it might end. They cannot let any of the kaiju spawn live. Hicks and Stans are faced with a big dilemma, and eventually are forced to give O'Neill and all the others exactly 20 minutes to regroup and get out of there. O'Neill confirms as he and Ford contract everyone through their earpieces to inform them. Philippe does the same to his own soldiers. The three commanders are in a hallway somewhere with their fellow troops, as they can hear the sounds of yelling and roaring in the distance. O'Neill acts like a true leader as he urges everyone to follow him. He's getting every one of his men and women out of here. Newton and Serizawa run for their lives through the hallways. Their fellow scientists get picked off one by one as a whole horde of monsters comes after them. They soon find an elevator in which they all run and try to get down in. It won't close immediately, causing another scientist to get eaten as well. Just as the kaijus are at the elevator opening, it finally closes. Serizawa and Newton are completely left alone now. Newton is panicking severely, while Serizawa calms him down. That's when they receive Ford's message of the evacuation. They are all to regroup at the entrance hall of the building, 20 minutes until bombing. Hicks wants to keep sending more soldiers into the city as he needs to buy the people of the mission more time. But then a sergeant urges him not to since they won't have enough men at the base otherwise. They can't risk it. Hicks does show genuine care for his troops now, as he can't let O'Neill and the others down. It's too important to get those samples back. It's too important and he won't lose his men and women down there. Serizawa and Newton come out of the elevator on another level as they arrive at an empty hallway. They can hear faint noises in the distance. It's a very tense moment as they both have a pistol but hardly know how to use it. They move towards one of the storage rooms and block the door. They decide to stay there and try to contact some others. They are simply too afraid to continue alone. They contact Ford, who hears them. Ford tells this to O'Neill and Philippe and thus start a rescue mission towards the storage room where Serizawa and Newton are. We have a very intense moment where the squadron with the three commanders moves down a long staircase in order to get down to the floor where they need to go. Slowly they go, watching every step, checking every corner, fearing that behind each and every corner might be a kaiju waiting for them. That's when O'Neill gets a message from one of his own men who is trapped somewhere else. It's very urgent. O'Neill can't let the man die and rallies his own soldiers to come with him. Ford is shocked and urges O'Neill to stay together. They can't split up now. It's a tense scene as the two commanders have a whole argument, but both are forced to accept. O'Neill claims he has been fighting with these people almost his entire life. He has never abandoned any one of them. Not now, not ever. He knows the importance of the mission, but he won't let any of his own soldiers die if he knows he can save them. He wishes Ford and Philippe good luck, and then leaves along with the few soldiers he still has left. Ford, Philippe, and their handful of soldiers now are forced to continue alone. We get a whole scene of O'Neill and his followers rushing through a hallway towards the locations where his other soldiers are trapped. Then, a door gets breached by several baby kaijus and a whole fight starts. They fire at them with all their weapons, but these hardly have any effect. A grenade is thrown, which does kill some of them. We follow O'Neill now through this whole ordeal as he constantly has the back of his men and women fighting alongside him. Whatever they do, push forwards! Serizawa and Newton are still in their room as they contemplate everything they have done. They can only hope the samples they have collected are still in good condition. The briefcase in which all those samples are stored are with Nick, and they have no idea where he is. That's when the two suddenly hear sounds coming from the other side of the door. Serizawa and Newton are scared out of their minds, but remain as silent as they can be. There are sounds coming closer and closer. But then it appears to be the voice of Vivienne. Extremely relieved, Serizawa opens the door and sees it's indeed Vivienne and Nick and some others. The briefcase with samples is still safely in Nick's arms. They mentioned they also heard Newton and Serizawa's message to Ford, so decided to also head their way there. Now they can only hope Ford and his soldiers reach them in time, and nothing else doesn't. Not to mention Vivienne checks her watch and sees they only have 14 minutes left until the bombing starts. Ford, Philippe and their own soldiers continue down the staircase, which is when they suddenly hear noises coming from far above them. They all see how dozens of kaijus found their way to the stairs as well, and all come rushing down towards them from above. Rush with all haste further down as they open fire. Hold them off! And a very intense moment follows, as all the soldiers try to kill every kaiju that comes storming towards them. Finally, they make it to the correct floor, but that's when the monsters are right on them. One soldier tries to reach for the door but gets jumped from above. Ford and Philippe do whatever they can to make their soldiers get through, but they simply can't as dozens of monsters jump at them from the stairs. Gunfire echoes loudly, and trooper after trooper gets killed. Philippe now has a moment where he sees all of his own soldiers dying. He loses it completely and screams loudly, rushing forward as he fires at a wave of monsters coming towards him. He curses as loud as he can, avenging his fallen friends. But just as it appears that Philippe is almost capable of actually killing each and every one of the monsters, he gets jumped by two kaijus from above. And Ford is forced to see how the French commander gets pinned to the ground. Philippe yells and curses, even grabs out a knife as he starts to stab the monsters who are gnawing at him. Ford yells, but is powerless as Philippe is eaten alive. Ford does whatever he can, but also notices how his own troops are dying left and right. The entire staircase is a bloodbath. Then he finally manages to reach the door and open it, urging the few soldiers he still has left to come through. But also, they all get killed. The last woman under his command reaches for his arm but then gets bitten in her legs. Ford is forced to let her go as she gets dragged away. Faced with no other option, the captain grabs all the grenades he still has left, throws them at the massacre scene, shuts the door and runs as fast as he can down to the hallway where he is. The explosion completely demolishes the entire staircase, even causing a floor to collapse partially. Ford gets taken by the blast force and is knocked unconscious against the wall. The captain lies there all alone in the middle of the hallway, as the whole group of scientists still wait in the storage room. Waiting for the brave heroes to rescue them, they pray. They all pray. Pray for salvation, as the clock until the bombing starts keeps on ticking. The last thing that we see is the image of the entire main hall of Madison Square Garden, as all the hundreds of baby kaijus have hatched and make their way for the surface.